5:31, and we will bring this meeting to order. This is the January 22nd, 2019 meeting of the Complaint Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. Please call the roll.
Matthew Kate. Matthew Kate present. Robin Martin.
Present.
Robin Martin present. Chair Tesfaye.
Present.
Chair Tesfaye present. We have a quorum.
And we have a couple of agenda changes. The complainant in item number 6, that's file number 18085, has let us know that she cannot be at the meeting today. Is anyone here present for item number 6?
Pardon me, is that the complainant, Ms. Sandra Weiss?
No. So item number 6 is a complaint filed by Liz Arbus against Margaret Baumgartner and the Office of the City Attorney. Okay, so that item will not be heard today. The next agenda change is for item number 7. That's file number 18094. That's a complaint filed by Anonymous against the Executive Director, Trent Rohr, and the Department of Human Services. Is anyone present today for that item? So both of those items are being moved off of the agenda. Can we move to item number 2?
Item number 2, approval of the November 27, 2018 Complaint Committee meeting minutes.
Is there a motion to approve the November 27th, 2018 meeting minutes?
Move to approve the minutes. Seconded.
Is there any public comment on that motion? Seeing none, can we take that by acclamation?
Yes. Would you like me to call roll?
No, we can just take it by acclamation. Thank you. Can we move to item number 3?
Item number 3, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction but not on today's agenda.
Would anyone like to make public comment? Seeing no public comment is now closed. Can we move to the next item?
Item number 4, file number 18049, complaint filed by Robert M. Smith against the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721 by failing to respond to a request for public records in a timely and/or complete manner.
Is the complainant present? Okay. Yes, if we can put the time up for him. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have 3 points. The first is that Ms. Powers promised you, please consult the record, that she would make these documents available on a rolling basis. That she has not done, although incredibly, a year has gone by since this public records request. This alone defeats any argument that there is not a duty to make these documents available. She has acknowledged that duty to you, and her boss, Ms. Bourne, the chief of staff of the museum, has told you. The museum has spent hundreds of hours on this. These hours have yielded almost no documents. Sorry.
Speaking to the microphone. Thank you.
Let me know if there's a problem. Any journalist would ask, what is in these documents that make museum representatives so very afraid of answering the PRR as they are legally required to do? Point 2. The few recent documents that Ms. Powers is responsible for having provided are heavily redacted, without any explanation as to what was redacted or on what basis. Ms. Powers told you that she has no or perhaps little, I've forgotten, training with regard to public records requests, but she has apparently heavily used the counsel of the city attorney's office. Putting aside the fact that she's hardly the sole administrative employee of the museums and reports to the chief of staff. They promised documents, they haven't provided the documents, and the ones they have provided are redacted with no stated basis of authority. Point 3, my last point. Is the microphone okay? Yeah, you can hear me. In an excess of caution and for the avoidance of doubt, my public records request was addressed to the museums. May I repeat for emphasis, the museums, not COFAM or anybody else. The museums are public, and nobody denies that. I'm entitled, and so is every other San Franciscan, to all documents, well, I guess anybody at all, to the museums and the not-for-profit, to all the documents in the museums and the non-for-profit entities share in their files, electronic or otherwise. May I remind you of my sort of lay parsing of the museum. There's Silo 1, the museums. Silo 2, the not-for-profit they've set up, which does some administrative work. Silo 3, the fundraising entity. Anything in Silo 1, wherever it comes from, including Silo 2 or Silo 3, are public documents by law. I'm entitled also to what only COFAM, the second silo, has in its files. Why? The COFAM, second silo, is leaning heavily on the fact that it's a separate not-for-profit entity. But the people who drafted these statutes put in statutory exceptions with regard to not-for-profit entities that determine whether they must respond to public records requests. One of these exceptions is whether the entity shares a board with the public entity, or at least some board members with the public entity is the statutory criterion. This entity, COFAM, Silo 2, has the very same, and I've given you the document in advance, board of museums, which are public entities. It is absolutely impossible for COFAM not to respond to public records requests, no matter how much it may wish not to do so. Should be absolutely transparent here is being kept secret. And the only question any journalist would ask is, why do these employees of the museums wish so desperately to keep the records out of public scrutiny? And I will stop there, other than to re-emphasize, if I may, this has been going on for a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone present on behalf of the city? Thank you.
Okay. Did you need me to state my name? Okay. My name is Melissa Powers. I'm here on behalf of the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. Just regarding the few points that Mr. Smith stated and in response, as far as the rolling basis of these documents, the last hearing that we were at, it was clearly stated that there was going to be a distinct set of questions sent to the advising city attorney to this complaint committee and task force to help us parse out what does or does not apply to COFAM and the foundation aside from the Fine Arts Museums. We left that hearing under the impression that this was sort of a big question in terms of what would then be the next step of the documents. The resources that we have to review in the 2-month span that I believe is the subject of this request is in the hundreds of thousands. And the resource to review that is about one person with this, maybe then a supervisory review. So to then now engage in a rolling basis review when we left here with the impression that we were going to have some perhaps true lines in the sand, and then that didn't happen. We never heard back. I'm under the impression that you guys never heard back from the city attorney. So that kind of stymied. And again, going to the resource, then we have other requests that have come in. But mainly, when we left this hearing, it was distinctly stated that we need legal opinions by the city attorney that will help us going forward. And we didn't hear from them. And going back to Mr. Smith's point that this has been going on a very long time, I agree. And we have been asking since the very beginning of this if he could just help us define. There were 5 complaints. I know Mr. Kate's been here, but for the two of you that are new to this perhaps file, it's a subset of 5 complaints. And the one that's kind of, I think, the one where we're really at a cross in the road is the complaint number 3, where he's asked for all correspondence between COFAM and FAMSF. I did give him what we could find, or what correspondence we had between FAMF and FAMSF. We don't dispute that when something has a nexus with a FAMSF employee is subject to the Sunshine Ordinance and the CPRA. But it is an overwhelming amount. And we have asked even for search terms, even for priority of who he's looking for. And he hasn't given that, because now it's sort of developed into this, now I want all of COFAM's records. So when we left here, there was a distinct impression that there was going to be guidance from the city attorney's office, which we never received. And, regarding his point 2s and point 3s, it's all kind of tied together. We are at an impasse. The city has provided those records that are city records. And that's why you see in many of the pieces of paper where it says FAMSF has no responsive records or refer to COFAM, Mr. Smith is now saying that now he can have the COFAM records. These are legal questions, and before, our resources are taxed beyond sustainability to be reviewing over 200,000 emails when we have these pending issues, then I think we need to regroup. I mean, there's no intention, malfeasance here where no one is being intentional. It's a resource issue, and it's also an issue that was referred to the city attorney's office that advises the task force. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Lachey, are you familiar with whether we've received anything back from the city attorney's office on this issue?
Here to respond to the...
I'm sorry.
No, I was asking Ms. Leger if we had received a response to...
Questions?
Yes, from the
Yes,
city
I
attorney.
haven't seen anything yet.
Okay. Have either of you?
I had something, it would have been included in the packet, but Victor put together the packet. I haven't seen anything since then.
Thank you. At this time, do you have any questions for the petitioner or the respondent?
I do have a few questions, and it does pertain to actually some of the legal. I do think that we're basically just about to where it's a legal question. I don't know that there are that many facts that this committee really can. I could be missing something here, but I think the issue of COFAM and whether those records are public is basically the central point. And Mr. Smith actually provided, we haven't heard anything from the city attorney's office, but Mr. Smith did in his, most recent response, provided a couple of authorities that actually I had found independently shortly before going through today's packet. And they do raise a couple of questions that I think are the last factual issues that at least I think I need. And I guess, Ms. Powers, to you, is it the case that the COFAM board includes members who are also on the city department museums board as well?
Yes, and I just want to go back to one point you just made, though, in terms of it's kind of twofold, only because there's been sort of a creeping expansion of now what he's saying. The original request was for COFAM to FAMSF, and we're not disputing that he's entitled to documents where there's a COFAM-FAMSF, connection. This is for complaint 3. What we're saying is that we are requesting that it be somewhat narrowed in scope. It's been reviewed before by the task force when it talks about the taxation on the resources. So it has somehow now blossomed into this discussion that he now can have all COFAM records, which has never really been requested, and I don't really actually think that's an appropriate request when the real thing, the intent is for city records. So now it's blossomed into, now he wants all of COFAM records, which would mean going into the PowerPoint that I gave numerous iterations ago, and I think it's in the packet like around 136, 137, where we talk about, when it's FAMSF involved employee to an outside person, we agree. You should be seeing those. When it's COFAM to COFAM, then that's a different situation. And it's going through all of those emails is where we're asking for a narrowing of the scope. As far as the Board of Trustees goes, the COFAM board has people on it that are not on the FAMSF board. There are 11 people in addition on COFAM.
And those would be members who are board members of the foundation separately, but then and I don't know that it matters how many board members, but there are, the terminology, I'll use the word museums for the city department or the city agency, which is maybe confusing, but there are board members who sit on the board, COFAM board members who sit on the board of the museum's city agency.
Meaning the same people?
Same people.
Yes,
Okay.
there are. But I just would like to point out, I think one of the cases he cited where he even states in his own memo, to reiterate, COFAM does not get any money from the city. And I think that was a distinction that Mr. Wolf was asking about earlier on when we first came here. It is a non-profit private entity.
And it gets no, I assume it gets, it's a city-owned building that COFAM operates out of, and I don't know if, does COFAM pay rent, or is it?
Well, I know that the city pays the utilities. My guess, I don't want to misspeak. I don't think COFAM pays rent. I think that would be a city, but I don't want to.
But what you're saying, though, is there's no direct kind of grant from the city and county of San Francisco to COFAM.
Correct.
And so is it, and then we can ask Mr. Smith separately, because I guess I have just one or two more questions for you. I mean, the position is that you've given him everything except for basically COFAM to COFAM or COFAM to foundation correspondence and documents, and that you've turned over everything from your perspective that involves the museums, an employee with the museum's conversation with COFAM. Those emails have been turned over. Is what
Conceding that what has not has been COFAM to FAMSF because the volume is so high, and all we're asking is that perhaps we can reduce it or prioritize it. Is he looking for a certain names in museums? I mean, we have numerous, I don't know the number off the top of my head, security guards. I mean, does he want maybe they've emailed some COFAM. I mean, so in terms of when you're looking at, one person reviewing this, and I'm sure Mr. Smith doesn't want to be getting a drip drap of emails for the next 5 years of his life. I mean, and I think Mr. Hyland's words for him was, help them help you.
And so, but no documents, in that big universe that need to be sorted through, none have been provided or produced since the last time we were here a couple months ago.
I think that what I gave him was the unredacted of the FAMF to FAMSF. And there were not that many documents in that situation because we only have 11 FAMF trustees and there's no FAMF employees.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And so is it, I mean, it is definitely the case that or is it fair to say that there are almost certainly records that are from your position that should be disclosed and will be disclosed? It's just involving COFAM, but it's just that you've not gotten to them yet because of the volume.
Right.
Okay. Have you all asked, has COFAM or the museums or both, separately, together, either way, asked for either city attorney analysis on the kind of legal question that we're dealing with, or engaged their own lawyers some other way to consider what is COFAM's responsibility under the ordinance and under the Public Records Act?
Well, I'm only going to speak to, we have a city attorney that advises the city on when we are engaged in these hearings, and she advises us only on the city side.
has COFAM ever sought anybody, whether it's city attorney or whether it's its own counsel?
I don't want to speak to, COFAM does not get advice from the city attorney, but I'm not going to speak to that issue.
Have the museums, the city agency, has it said, asked for advice on COFAM's, the applicability of these open records laws to COFAM?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
So
question?
has the museum, as a city agency, said, we've got this relationship with COFAM. What is COFAM's responsibility as an individual entity? Have you asked the city attorney to look into COFAM specifically?
I don't want
to.
I don't want to get into any details of conversations with the city attorney, because then I don't want it to then be interpreted that we have done so and then sacrificing attorney-client privilege.
Sure. If I could hear, yeah, Mr. Smith, just his thoughts on the city attorney. And I think those are the questions that I have for Ms. Powers. I think, especially if it's something that COFAM has not looked into. I think COFAM needs to have this looked into, and I think, I don't know what the other members are going to do with this, but I think this is ready for the full task force, and I think it would be very helpful for a COFAM, and maybe it's engaged in this analysis and you're not aware, or for reasons that you may be alluded to, you don't want to talk about right now. But I think it's important, because I think and I need to read more closely for my own purposes, but I'm starting to get the impression that under the statutes and under the ordinance and under what little case law there's out there available, that COFAM is going to fall under the category of local agency to which the public records laws would apply.
But I'd like to repeat, the request is COFAM to FAMSF. The official request of why this is our fourth time here, the complaint is FAMSF to COFAM, and this has somehow now blossomed into, should we be talking to COFAM about whether or not COFAM thinks that we should give them every email under the sun?
Sure.
The specific request is FAMSF to COFAM.
Not entirely. The request, we're talking about request number 3. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is a two-part, because I'm looking at the city attorney's memo on this complaint where it breaks down the request.
Which page are you on?
I'm on P5.
Thank you.
In the city attorney's memo, I see the request for the following: all correspondence and all documents relating in any fashion to correspondence between COFAM and the city. And that's of course broad, but it does capture more than just COFAM to the museum's correspondence. It could include COFAM internal to COFAM discussions about COFAM to museums correspondence.
My impression from the beginning has always been that this has been, and I think in some of the other pages where it's written out, like more not in the memo, is COFAM to FAMSF, which again, in terms of the clarity, like that's very generic in the sense of, are you talking about COFAM employees? Are you talking about COFAM trustees? Like going to the point of like helping us narrow it down, right, to now somehow extrapolating that, well, now really the sub question now is COFAM to COFAM. I'm here on behalf of the Fine Arts Museum, the city, and somehow this is now blossoming into COFAM to COFAM.
But if there are COFAM, because my recollection is all the emails that the city has, because the city has, it's all one server, correct? Right. And it's all I think the email handle is like a COFAM email, if I recall.
No, it's a FAMSF email.
Okay, so it is a city email handle.
No, it is at FAMSF. Yes, so at FAMSF.org. Yes.
Okay. And so even COFAM employees have FAMSF.
My only one of my points, but my main point to this discussion is just that I feel like it's kind of going down a slippery slope of what was not the original scope of the request. The original request and why is just, asking for number 3 to be narrowed. And even with Mr. Smith's arguments and submissions where he talks about the silos, it's all about what has gone into silo 1. And we have always maintained that we don't disagree that if there is a nexus with silo 1, like an email between a FAMSF employee and a COFAM silo 2, COFAM silo 3, that would be subject to disclosure. But now we're talking about silo 2 to silo 2, silo 3 to silo. I mean, that's where I think we're going outside the scope of even what the request is.
So I'd like to give Mr. Smith an opportunity to provide some clarification briefly. But at this point, I don't really see any factual issues that are left to be discussed. There's some legal interpretation, and it sounds like the museums would just like to get, a decision on what they're supposed to be doing. And then there's also a possibility that we can use the compliance committee to figure out the best way to get some compliance on this once it's decided by the full task force, the scope of what we're supposed to be looking for. So if we could have...
What's the compliance committee?
The compliance committee works with complainants and respondents to figure out, the schedule, how we're going to get all of these documents from one party to the other. But I'd like to give Mr. Smith the opportunity to give us a couple of points of clarification. Again, I'd like this to be brief just because, as you can kind of hear where we're going, we would like this matter to move along, but just to get some information from you, that'd be great. Thank you.
No one wants this matter to move along more than I. It's been a year, folks. And when I stand here now, I am amazed. And you'll forgive me. I'm trying to be tranquil. I emailed the city attorney, so I know exactly what's happening with regard to the city attorney because I have a reply email from the city attorney who I assume who represents the Silo 1, the Fine Arts Museum in San Francisco. She stated flatly that their office, I said, how can your office be representing a private, non-city, non-municipal entity, namely COFAM or anybody else? That would, of course, the subtext is that would be a misuse of city funds. Since they maintain COFAM is not a municipal entity, Silo 2. And she responded, we don't. We represent the Fine Arts Museum, and that's it. When I got that reply on Friday, I sent her, of course, it's a holiday, another question, which is pending, which is, all right, they're separately represented, which is the table that the museum representative is dancing around. Of course, they're represented by somebody, but not by the city's attorney. I said, everything, all communications between your office, that is the city attorney, and this outside lawyer representing Silo 2, COFAM, is producible. It's not privileged, so please show it to me. I'm waiting for a response. Assuming there's been communication between the attorneys for COFAM and attorneys and the city attorney's office. But number one, from the beginning, I never even knew about COFAM. I asked the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco for these documents. The Fine Arts Museums. Not COFAM, not Silo 2, not Silo 3. And they have taken consistent refuge in this pipe dream that these are separate entities, although the law says that, among other things, as a matter of common sense, if the boards are the same, and I submitted to you, Mr. Cate and the committee, their own material showing the boards are exactly the same, then it has to be subject to the Public Records Act. So that's just a red herring. So is this business about resources. This is a multi-million-dollar enterprise. They brag about it on their website. Multi-million dollars. And they have expended what? 1/10? No, not even that. 1 micro part of one person in an effort to meet this public records request, which is a legal duty and obligation. They can't come here and tell you, we don't have the manpower. It would take too much. We haven't done anything, of course, but we don't have the manpower or person power.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So right now, so for the complaint committee, our purpose is to make sure that all of, the facts that have been alleged to, meet this
Do you feel you
claim.
have the facts?
We do feel we have the facts. So I just want to thank you for your comments and excuse you at the moment. And I wanted to ask the committee members if they have a motion at this time.
I would make a motion, but I didn't know what, in terms of the procedures, if there's like another round or if we've had enough conversation, which I feel like we probably have.
Right. And so for this item, I recall that we've heard this before, so we've already made a determination on jurisdiction and whether the documents are public. And so we would be looking for a motion to move this matter on to the full task force. And we wouldn't, I'm not sure what motion you will choose to make, but we, haven't been making recommendations one way or the other.
Right.
There's some questions for the full task force to determine.
And I agree. And I do think, as I said earlier, that this is ready factually. It would be very good to have the legal analysis, both from the city attorney's office and if COFAM and the museums can weigh in, that would be very helpful, I think, for the task force. But I would make the motion that this complaint be referred to the full task force for its consideration.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, do we have any public comment on that motion? Okay. So before we vote on this motion, I just want to ask Ms. Leger if you could correspond with our city attorney for the full task force and make sure that any memos that are pending get included in the packet before this, or when this item is scheduled for a full hearing. Whenever it's scheduled, just make sure that that's included in the packet.
I'll call them tomorrow morning when I get in.
Sure. Great. So seeing no public comment on this motion, please call the roll.
Member Kate?
Aye.
Member Kate, aye. Member Martin?
Aye.
Member Martin, aye. Chair Tesfaye?
Aye.
Motion continued, the matter to the full task force moves.
Thank you. Call the next item, please.
Item number 5, file number 18083. Excuse me. Complaint filed by Robert M. Smith against the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721 by failing to respond to a request for public records in a timely and/or complete manner.
We need to put some time on the clock for Mr. Smith.
I understand there are two city attorneys are at work here. One is the one that counsels this committee and so on, and the other one, the museum. And the first question in your lawyer's brief or outline was, has Mr. Smith addressed his request to the museum or to COFAC? And the answer, of course, is to the museum. All right. The public records request, to be very clear, this is about Saudi Arabia. They've managed to stretch it out so that the exhibition has now just ended, about Muslim fashion. So the exhibition is closed, but the question remains, was there Saudi funding of any kind? And they're saying that, again, well, this is COFAM and we're not going to tell you. It's essentially the same argument. But I point out to you, to avoid doubt, the request was addressed to the museums, not to COFAM or anybody else, and there's no doubt that the museums are public. Point two, I want to point out, since you have the file, that the first response I got from the museums from Ms. Powers said there were very few documents. Somebody turned down a cocktail party request and that sort of stuff. So I then warned her, frankly, of the consequences of being untruthful and pointed to what was already publicly available on the internet. On the internet. She replied that they have documents, indeed, but the documents are somehow shielded from public view because the employees of COFAM are not employees of the museum, even though they were in Saudi Arabia on behalf of the museum, our museum, the city museum. So putting aside what may appear deceitful, even if my PRR had been addressed to that other entity, which it wasn't, I'm entitled to the documents that the museums and the not-for-profit share in their files. To repeat the argument I made just a few moments ago, I'm also entitled to what only COFAM, Silo 2, has in its files. There are statutory exceptions. They are certainly met in this case. They must provide the COFAM material. They are relying on COFAM employees, not being museum employees, in a circumstance, get this, where they told you earlier in their presentations that almost all the employees, all of them, of our museum are COFAM employees. If you follow this logic, we would get nothing, ever, about anything. Point 3, the city's attorney's office is supposed to have given, according to the testimony here of Ms. Bourne, the chief of staff of the museums, unbounded legal advice. Unbounded legal advice. And we're talking now about where things stand legally. It is quite puzzling, quizzical. What should be transparent here is being kept secret. This hasn't shifted in some sort of slippery slope. These documents that I sought and have been seeking for 1 year, everybody is entitled to. They have done a remarkable job of delaying, and now they've delayed this request until the exhibition in question is closed. But I still want to know to what extent the Saudis provided support in any fashion. And for goodness sake, as a matter of common sense, shouldn't the people of San Francisco know whether this or any other exhibition was funded by the Saudis or any other foreign power as a matter of general knowledge? And how can you get around that by saying, our employees, guess what, are all of them are employees of a not-for-profit. So, ho, 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 you can't have them. If that were the standard, no journalist, no citizen, no person would get anything from any public entity. They could all set up these phony baloney things. And the final point I just wanted to clarify earlier, 30 seconds. Yeah. They share, they told us at the first session, the same computer server. Their real world problem is that everything that all three entities have, or at least the major two, are on the same information system. Thanks.
We could hear from the respondent. Thank you.
Again, Melissa Powers for the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco. One thing I agree with Mr. Smith on here is it looks like we may have a similar issue as the last file. His request was all documents relating in any fashion to subsidies, gifts, travel, hotel, payments, meal, go on and on, and anything of value given or supplied to the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. We provided him, I think it was 9 emails. Every single one the director was on. Again, going back to our position that when we see correspondence involving a city employee, we are providing that. And that's what we provided him. And again, whether it ties back to this issue at large, whether or not he's entitled to a COFAM employee's emails with an outside third party, then I guess that's going to then become part of the next task force hearing. But as far as the city is concerned, this request has been satisfied.
Thanks. Do we have any questions?
And I know this has been talked about, and I've probably been here for every one of the meetings that's come up, but just to confirm again what Mr. Smith just said, it is all one computer server that the city maintains and has control over.
The city doesn't maintain it. And have
City does
control.
not
I
maintain
mean,
it.
it's a COFAM server. The server originally was provided by COFAM, like I don't know how many years ago.
Right.
And our IT employees who help, if we have a request or something like that, they are COFAM employees.
And on that note, so are there any IT employees for the museums that are city employees?
No.
So when you had mentioned that there's like security guards and things like that, those people are city employees, but specifically the IT are not city employees.
Correct. And I have the chart in the other one, but I want to say that there are no IT city employees.
And then to clarify, you had said that the board of COFAM is both city employees and then also non-city employees. And then
Yeah.
Mr. Smith had said they're all city employees, so I just want to...
Right. The COFAM board is comprised of the trustees that are on the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco board. But the COFAM board also has additional members that are not on the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco board.
Okay.
So thank you for asking that follow-up, because it is not accurate to say they are identical boards.
Okay.
Because it is not accurate to say they are identical boards.
Okay. Are there any further questions? No.
When the COFAM IT department does work on the server, if a museum employee asks for technical help, does the COFAM IT person respond to that or charge the museum?
No, they respond, because it's also part of the MOU that was that we provide operational support to the museums.
Do we have a motion at this time?
I would make a motion that, I don't know if we previously found jurisdiction in public records at issue, but I would move to find task force has jurisdiction.
Well, let's get clarification on that. I believe that this item was also a continued item. So, I mean, I know on the last item we had already found jurisdiction and that the documents were public. So we need to get clarification from the clerk. Have we found that we have jurisdiction on this item and that these documents are public?
This is the first time this case has been heard.
Okay. Okay. Well, then that would need to be included
Yeah,
in the
that's-
motion. Thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying.
so I would make a motion that we find that the task force would have jurisdiction, that the records at issue are public, and to refer the matter to the task force for its determination.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Is there any public comment on that motion? Okay, seeing no public comment, please call the roll.
Member Kate?
Aye.
Member Kate, aye. Member Martin?
Aye.
Member Martin, aye. Chair Tesfaye?
Aye.
Chair Tesfaye, aye. The motion continues.
Thanks.
I need a second.
Sure.
Okay, so we're done with this issue?
Yes.
Okay. So
Thank
we
you.
have John Cote, who's from the city attorney's office. He was here for the Liz Arbus matter, which I explained to him was not going to be heard today. But
Okay.
I'd like to address the committee.
he wasn't here for public comment.
Okay. So that you guys know, in our practice, it's not a requirement
Right.
it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We can proceed with all the documentation to the complaints.
Right. And I'm sorry, remind me which one we're talking about.
Item number 6.
Item number 6. we can do that. I mean, either way, I mean, we could also, yeah. Sure.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Cote?
Thank you. So it sounds like this will be pretty brief. I just wanted to point out for item number 6, I'm sorry, for the record, I'm John Cote, Communications Director for the City Attorney's Office, that I'm here to request that this item be tabled, and the reason for that is the non-appearance of the complainant, Ms. Arbus. As I noted in my letter of December 13th on page 4, that in the event that a complainant fails to appear at a Sunshine Ordinance Task Force or committee hearing regarding their complaint, that the item shall be tabled without prejudice. There is the issue of without prior communication. My position would be simply that this one sentence, 4-letter email that the task force received does not rise to the level of good cause for a continuance or to excuse the attendance of an individual. And so I would simply request that the committee table this complaint.
Thanks. So I would like to reschedule this item. We have a lot of complainants that, she did let us know on Friday, so that's a decent amount of notice, and a large number of our complainants are not sophisticated with, dealing with a system like this. So I'm not likely to table this item to never be heard again. I think we would just reschedule it. If there's another lack of attendance with that explanation, then we'll have an area for concern. I would also like for Ms. Lachey to respond to Ms. Arbus and let her know that this item will be rescheduled one more time, but that, unless she gives us a specific reason why she's not showing up, then, I'm not sure if we just can't keep continuing to have this item around. So we would ask her to either withdraw her complaint or appear before us the next meeting.
And sorry if this has already been said by either you or anybody else. Is this the first time this has come up to the committee, this particular complaint?
I'm not familiar with this item, so maybe Ms. Lachey can.
This has come up within the last 6 weeks. Am I correct?
The complaint,
no,
the complaint was
it's-
filed within the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay,
not.
so this has not been before the
This
committee.
has not been before task force.
So it's
no.
not, also not been,
It hasn't been through any
Yep.
process yet at
Okay.
all.
so I mean, I would make a motion, I don't know if the terminology is to continue it to the call of the chair or to just continue it. Let's do it, continue to the call of the chair.
Thank you. And then, do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any public comment on that motion? No? Okay. If you could call the roll, or if we could take that by acclamation. Yep. We'll be fine. Okay. And then, Ms. Lachey, if you could proceed with the instructions to contact this person, let them know that this item will be rescheduled, but that they need to appear or also request if they would like to withdraw the complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cote.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Can you call the next item? Thank you.
Item number 8, file number 18095, complaint filed by Sandra Weiss against Kevin Guy and Office of the Short-Term Rentals for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721 by failing to respond to an immediate disclosure request in a timely and/or complete manner. I just want to say that this matter also has not been before committee.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful. Is Ms. Weiss present? Sure, if you, moment. Thank you. Thank you. And to just double check, have you heard anything from her?
No.
No, okay. I would like to hear from the respondent.
Seems that I'm in a similar predicament as Mr. Cote. I hadn't heard from Ms. Weiss today either. So my name is Kevin Guy. I'm the director of the Office of Short-Term Rentals, which is a division of the Planning Department. Just to summarize the memo that was in front of you and the issues at hand, November 27th, Ms. Weiss submitted a public records request via email, which requested a list of all short-term rental hosts registered with our office, along with their, quote, corresponding information. On November 29th, I provided Ms. Weiss with a, quote, public version of the registry. I'll get into more what that means. The version only includes a few fields, namely the short-term rental certificate number, which is a unique identifier that we issue to each certificate holder, street names and types, not number, and then zip codes. So within that email and a series of subsequent emails, I also explained to Ms. Weiss that the city short-term rental ordinance includes specific instructions to redact identifying information about hosts. So I will read verbatim the pertinent language from that section. The registry shall be available for public review to the extent required by law, except that to the extent permitted by law, the department shall redact any permanent names and street and unit numbers from the records available for public review. Ms. Weiss then countered that the language of the ordinance does not stipulate that emails will be redacted and requested that I provide email addresses of all hosts on the registry. I responded that is the practice of the Office of Short-Term Rentals to not provide any identifying information about hosts on the registry, including email addresses. I also emailed Ms. Weiss on December 3rd to clarify the intent and purpose of the information desired by Ms. Weiss in an attempt to find some other means to respond to the records request without violating the privacy practices of the Office of Short-Term Rentals. Later that day, the complainant responded only that she would like to communicate with the registered host via email. No other end goal or rationale was given. So the intent of the cited privacy protections is to avoid releasing identifying information about the host and the location of the associated short-term rental property. If you have such information in your hand, an individual could locate the listing for a rental on a short-term rental platform, such as Airbnb, and identify a time when the property listing is likely to be vacant. This practice could enable behavior such as a burglary of a property while vacant. In addition to the cited language in the short-term rental ordinance, the Good Government Guide published by the San Francisco City Attorney's Office provides guidance on this issue. Subsection 3D2B states, in part, the general rule is that departments shall not disclose home addresses, personal phone numbers, or personal email addresses of the members of the public. Such personal contact information typically sheds no light on the operations of city government, and thus disclosure does not fulfill the central purpose of public records laws. Further, many individuals would not want their privacy and, in some instances, their safety threatened by unwelcome intrusions derived from public disclosure of their personal contact information. So as we all well know, if an email address of a host or any other individual is available to the general public, the email address itself could be used to find other identifying information. It's a ready and very useful Google search term about the host through general web searches, including their name, home address, personal phone number, and possibly even the short-term rental listing itself. Hosts that have applied for the registry since February 2015 have provided personal information, including email addresses, to the Office of Short-Term Rentals with a reasonable expectation of privacy. Such an expectation would be seriously undermined by the release of email addresses and other identifying information, particularly if such information were to be released en masse as requested by the complainant. So for the foregoing reasons, if you do decide to take jurisdiction, we would respectfully request that you advise the task force as a whole to dismiss this complaint. Thank you.
Thanks. Do you have any questions for the respondent?
These are probably things I should just know as a human, but I don't. So anybody who wants to put their unit or a bedroom even, I guess, on Airbnb or HomeAway or I don't know what other the ones that they have to be on this registry and apply for the city approval?
Correct. So the only way you can get onto following a settlement agreement, some litigation with some of the platforms, the only way you can get onto one of these short-term rental sites is by either having a unique registration number issued by our office through an application process, or by the act of applying. We allow people to host while their application is pending.
Does your office, whenever, as part of the application process, does it notify? I may know the answer to this one, but does it notify the applicant that their information may be publicly released, both address, any email addresses or phone numbers that they submit to the city for as part of their approval?
Yeah, our application form does not address the issue one way or the other. However, certainly in narrative discussions, email communications with hosts who have expressed concerns, we point to the privacy protections. I should mention that this is a protocol that we developed long ago in concert with the city attorney's office. Has been, kind of widely used and accepted. We've received kind of very broad requests for members of the media, for example. This was a very hot media topic for a while.
Right.
With a presumed goal that they wanted to sort of, show a map of San Francisco and pinpoint where all the short-term rental listings are. One thing I should, and I don't want to go too much into the weeds here, but if you'll indulge me, the unique identifier that we give for that certificate number is the thing that firewalls the problem that I cited earlier about being able to pinpoint an exact location to an exact name to an exact address. When you go onto Airbnb in particular, if you use that platform, you see all the little, when you're searching for a rental, you see all those little pin drops. Those actually don't represent the exact locations of the short-term rentals. I think the margin of, I call it margin of error, margin of radius is anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 mile. So that's done by the company for privacy reasons as well. But if you get your hands on, as a member of the public, on the name, which you can easily access by email address, then and the registry would include their short-term rental certificate number that corresponds to that email. And the hosts are required to post that unique number on their listing. It's a very easy walk in the park to pinpoint their exact listing and location. And I should note as well, I certainly understand the desire of media to have these kind of broad requests. Ms. Weiss, unfortunately, didn't, despite my sort of prompting, didn't really provide me with any further information. And I understand that obviously we as city government in general trend to the side of transparency, and we don't want to sort of say anything that sort of dissuades them from seeking this information or be too intrusive about the request. But at the same time, I struggled with this in the absence of response from Ms. Weiss to find some compelling public interest in releasing the entirety of our thousands of hosts that are registered.
Right. And just one final one, I think. Do you recall, has the office ever released, information with numbers or email addresses tied to specific hosts, or are there? And if not, are there circumstances where you could had the complainant given a certain justification? I mean, what would that be?
We have received requests that are court-issued subpoenas for business records, and those are typically involve one particular property and one particular individual in furtherance of a court case, typically a landlord-tenant dispute. Tenant wasn't supposed to short-term rent, landlord found out, things like that.
If I may just interrupt, whenever the city responds to a subpoena in a civil litigation context and discloses that information, does the city redact the email address and the phone number and the same?
No, in those situations, we've been advised, and rightly so, that this is a subpoena for all information. So we'll hand over, for example, a full copy of the application, which includes proofs of residency, like a driver's license and vehicle insurance tied to that address and things like that. So a lot of sensitive information, but it is at the request of a court, and it's about typically one person or one property, not the entirety of the registry.
Okay, that was the other question I had, is whether there would be several properties at issue, or whether it's the host or the information at issue belongs to one of the parties to the case.
Right, right.
Are there cases or situations where the information's been released for multiple? I don't know if there's what that would be, but
I can't personally think of one. If we did release information about more than one property, it was maybe 2 or 3 properties that were associated with the same individual. but never to the extent of anything requested by Ms. Weiss, even with a subpoena.
Do you have any questions?
Did you ever consult with the city attorney about what to redact and what not to?
Yes. So we worked with the city attorney early on to, because there is this reference in the kind of inherent reference in the short-term rental ordinance to a public version of the registry. It doesn't come out and say that language, but if you say, okay, you're going to redact certain fields, at some point you have to define what that is. So very early on, we worked with the city attorney to develop what we dub our public version of the registry. We've shared that many times with individuals and members of the media. And then as ongoing individual queries come up, we consult with the city attorney as necessary on those as well.
Did you consult with them on this one?
This particular case, only briefly. I had verbal communications with Rob Kapla, Deputy City Attorney, who is our sort of ongoing operations person. And there was really, in his mind, his response, there was nothing that was distinct about this particular request from the other sort of very broad requests that we received from the media and others in the past.
Thank you.
So, I would like to hear what the complainant's response is to this general right of privacy exemption under the, under CPRA. And we haven't really had an opportunity to discuss that with her. I'm also, wondering if there's a potential that she's going to be withdrawing this complaint since she didn't respond or give us any information.
She has gotten everything that they've been provided, and she was provided a notice of this hearing, so.
Okay. Do you guys have any thoughts on what the next steps would be? I don't see any factual issues, and so, my initial inclination would be just to forward this to the full task force. I think that there is a legal question that we will be tackling about, is the section 40, chapter 41A of the Administrative Code, is there a conflict there with the Sunshine Ordinance, or is that being applied appropriately? But I think that we could do that before the full task force. My only concern would be if the complainant be present, yeah.
And the only thing I would, because I agree that, I think I would like to move this on, because of that, for that same thing. And I guess the only fear I would have is if we kept it at the committee level, and I'm sorry, Mr. Guy?
Yes.
So Mr. Guy comes back and maybe she does or doesn't, and then we do it again. Like if she's not going to come back, I'd rather her not come back for the full task force. That way, if she shows up, we can maybe get a decision made. And so, it'd be helpful. It's always helpful to hear the complainant, but I don't know that we need to at this level.
And the only reason I agree with that right now is because there's no factual issue in order to, or any further documentation that's needed in order to support a claim under this part of the code. Right. And then if we have a motion and then we move this on to be before the full task force and she chooses to withdraw it, then we just we'll pull it from the agenda. But at this point, I don't see the point of holding this pending within this committee. So
I agree.
Do we have a motion at this time?
I will. Oh, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to move it to the full task force.
Do we have a second? Okay. Do we have any public comment on that motion? Okay. Seeing none, can we take that motion by acclamation? Yep. Great. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Guy.
Thank you.
So I believe this is our last item on the agenda.
Yes, it is.
Anything else any
Not that I know of.
announcements? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Turn.
Second.
That by acclamation. Oh, any public comment on that motion? Any public comment? Seeing none, we will take that by acclamation. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Ms. Levy, I'm going to do these.
Hi.
Thanks for keeping me on. So with this
have to discuss
So
this.
you like Sam to be back?
Hang on.
Oh, from vacation, yeah. But back to life, back to reality. Yeah,
Do you
it
have
was
any,
nice while it lasted.
Any good Barcelona recommendations?
What kind of things would you be looking for? I have like tons of
we-
recommendations. Actually,
we-
it was really fresh in my mind. Is the microphone off?